Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment, for the Microsoft Surface Book 3. This specific 15-inch model retails for roughly $2,800 US before tax. We've got, of course, a nearly 4K 3:2 aspect ratio 15-inch display that detaches. In fact, that is the signature of the Surface Book lineup. If you didn't already know that, that's what it's all about. And a big bragging right of the third generation, really one of the only bragging rights, on paper at least, other than spec upgrades, is that now it detaches much faster and reattaches much more quickly. And that is true, so that's a good thing. After all, if this is one of the key features, I mean, that is the actual identity of the Surface Book, is that you can pop off the display and it becomes a powerful tablet, basically best-in-class tablet on the market, other than its battery life. That should be something they improve on. But outside of this nearly 4K 3:2 aspect ratio, which, I'm a fan of, it wouldn't sell me, but I know many of you out there want the 3:2 aspect ratio, and I understand it, and it's a good reason to pick up one of Microsoft's products that sport it. The display is good, but it's not amazing. And I'm starting with the display because, after all, it's a very important feature. So while I like what Microsoft has done in terms of screen size, real estate, resolution, unfortunately, color accuracy still isn't where it needs to be. But moving away from the display, which I think, come on, Microsoft, just drop an AMOLED on us already. Give us an OLED display. Make the fact that this screen detaches even more impressive. And the best way to do that is to give us a best-in-class display. Right now, I can't help but say that the display reminds me of the previous generation, and for good reason. There isn't really any true improvement. And that's much of the story with what once was a revolutionary product and now is much more like an evolutionary product. And frankly, that's why I skipped the second gen. So while I love the Surface Book 3 concept, and it used to just be a proof of concept all of roughly 5 years ago, now in its much more mature form, we have updated specs, but it seems like we've just ended up with a lot more price points and a lot more configuration, which is also a sign of a maturation of a product line. But sometimes, and you've heard this, I'm sure, from just about every other review that you've watched, listened to, read, whatever, it's time for a redesign. And I'll get to my thoughts on the redesign because I don't just think it needs to look different. I think it needs to change what it's capable of. So my redesign thoughts aren't just that I think this is a stale look, because the look I can live with. A lot of people hate this hinge because when it's closed, it allows dust to get in. It's not flush. OCD is not driving my decision on making a purchase with this, and I'm not insulting those of you that do feel that way. I completely understand, but I'll get to why I think the most important part of this machine, which is the display, not only needs an overhaul, as I mentioned, with the screen type and quality and accuracy, but also what's inside the tablet. So in this $2,800 spec, we've got an Intel Core i7-1065G7, which is the same 10th gen processor you'll find in pretty much every Ultrabook on the market. Keyword I just said, Ultrabook. You are not going to find that in desktop replacement machines. And for this price, for this size, and for this weight, you might start to think this is a desktop replacement. But I assure you, it is anything but that. Now, that doesn't make it a bad machine. I think the Surface Book line, whether you're going 13.5 or 15, they're one of a kind, quite literally, in that there's nothing like them and there's nothing as expensive as them. Even in the world of fruit, in Apple's land, nothing comes close to how much you are going to pay to have a detachable display. So, with that said, the processor is fine, but I do feel at this point we need to see something with more cores. Having the same sort of processor that you can find in a sub $1,000 laptop, or in the Surface Pro for that matter, 7th gen, is not enough to compel me personally to want to make this my daily driver. It weighs over 4 pounds. It has solid battery life at over 10 hours. You're not going to get the 17 hours that Microsoft quotes, but the processor just isn't enough in my opinion. That doesn't mean it's not powerful. It doesn't mean it won't do enough for those of you that are looking at it and want to buy it. Just know that for the money you're spending on this machine, the processor is paltry. It just isn't what it should be. Microsoft markets this as being a dynamic product that's going to serve much more than simple, media consumption, browsing the web, checking your email, using Office. Well, then let's have guts that reflect that. And while you might say, well, Ed, you've got a very competent NVIDIA GPU on board. Well, yes, inside the keyboard section is a dedicated GPU. By the way, we've got 32 gigs of RAM. Do you need 32 gigs of RAM? No, you don't. But it's nice to have. I'm not going to shun the 32 gigs of RAM. I scratch my head a little bit, and yes, you can go with less than 32 gigs of RAM. That's an option, but Microsoft has a very rigid structure with the configurations on these. For example, this $2,800 build, while it does have that GTX 1660 Ti Max-Q, which is a best-in-class GPU for this, I don't want to say for this weight, because you can get a much better GPU than that, but for this sort of hybrid product, it's a best-in-class, and I'll get to comparisons of other things you could compare it to from Lenovo, from HP, and also just tablets. But even with that GPU, I'm still not sure who this is best suited for. And you can go to the business side and get a Quadro, and the people that need Quadros, you know who you are. If you're in any sort of design business, you use Revit, you use AutoCAD, you should probably be getting the Quadro. Is it going to give you much better yields than the 1660 Ti Max-Q? Not necessarily, but it will be better, so go with that, okay? That question's answered. But when it comes down to it, the fact that we're getting a 0.5 terabyte NVMe drive in a $2,800 machine is just a punch right in the, well, you pick what part of the body. Face, crotch, stomach, it doesn't matter. It is not acceptable in my opinion. And again, I'm a huge fan of what Microsoft has done on the hardware side. I may sound like I'm overly critical throughout the course of this video, but that's because Microsoft, when we talk about the original Surface Pro, when we talk about the Surface Book, the Surface Laptop, the Surface Studio, everything has been, in my opinion, from a builder side, revolutionary, and then just fallen into a slump. And the Surface Pro X was the first new launch in a long time, and it is promising. It has a ways to go. Not promising, though, in the way this was. And so here we are looking at a third-generation product that has a lot of potential, and it is a very competent, powerful machine. I mean, it's just not as powerful as it should be for its price and its weight. That's really what it ultimately comes down to for me. So for those of you wondering, can you game with it? Absolutely. Pretty much any title you throw at this and drop down to 1080p resolution, you're not going to game at the nearly 4K res that this display has. You'll be fine. You will get 60 frames or more, no question about it. Okay? You're not going to have an issue. I'm not saying you're running it ultra. Let's be clear about that. As far as doing any other kind of work, video editing, photo editing, you're fine. Is this going to give you desktop replacement performance? No, but it's close because you do have that 1660 Ti with Max-Q design. I mean, that is, again, a competitive and competent GPU solution to have on board. So I've pretty much covered the important components of what this machine is comprised of. Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.0, great things. It has no Thunderbolt 3. Now, many of you may not think this is a big deal. Some of you may think it's the reason you won't buy it. I'm in the second group, which is that, to me, again, I'm scratching my head. Microsoft has put together this incredibly powerful machine that is so flexible, can really offer you the best of both worlds, and then they dropped out one of the biggest performance grabs out there. And I say that because a lot of people think that Thunderbolt 3 is only for eGPU. In other words, using an external GPU so that you can use the Core i7 that lives inside the tablet section of this machine and then have an external GPU like, whatever the latest NVIDIA or AMD card is that you own. Of course, in an enclosure that supports that. But that, to me, isn't the only reason to have Thunderbolt 3. A very good reason, and I've been covering it, are things like Sabrent's, and they're not the only one, but they're the only one that I've been reviewing, they're extreme hard drives. So if you are a video editor, okay, or even if you aren't, and you just want the fastest portable NVMe drives on earth, you can't leverage them with the brand new Surface Book 3 in the 13 or 15-inch variant. So while on my HP Spectre, I can hook up either of these, the 1 or the 4 terabyte Extreme, and transfer it over a gigabyte a second. Here in a machine that, again, is claiming to be aimed at creative professionals, well, those creative professionals are screwed. And I don't really get that. I mean, Microsoft has left a full-size SD card slot. I'm going to show that to you right now, which I love, by the way. You know, going around the machine, the power connector right here, still Microsoft's signature, which is a good thing. I don't think they should do away with it. The magnetic pull away, especially now that I've got a dog running around the house that could potentially break any laptop that's connected to a wall and just, you know, pull it down. That magnetic pull away is definitely a good thing. We have a Type-C port, but, you know, the Type-C port is for what? Connectivity, display output. No Thunderbolt 3 to me is a game breaker in 2020. And Microsoft's excuse, by the way, for that is security related. Now, I scratch my head on that because I know exactly the bug, the exploit they're talking about, but the likelihood of that exploit being leveraged is very low. On the other hand, I understand that if they've done their research and the majority of their Surface Book sales go to corporations, that they will not be able to, you know, excuse themselves from the liability associated with that. That's another story. So it's kind of a gray space for whether or not I want to throw the cake in Microsoft's face about the Thunderbolt 3, the lack thereof, or not. I don't work for them, obviously. I don't have the information they have. So a lot of people are saying it's bullshit. In my opinion, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of bullshit, and it's also true that, you know, if you're going to make something that's business oriented, you need to make sure it's secure. But on that note, that means that they could have only omitted Thunderbolt 3 on the business versions of this product. They didn't have to do it here in the traditional consumer line. We have a headphone jack, okay, right there. We have our power button volume rocker. By the way, the speakers on this machine suck. I don't care what anybody has to tell you. That's another thing where, I mean, look, my daily driver is an HP Spectre X360 13T. The speakers are mediocre, but boy, compared to this machine, they're good. That's how bad the speakers are on the Surface Book 3. The 13.5-inch gets a little bit more of an excuse because it's a much smaller machine, but with the 15-inch having such subpar audio, and I'll play you back some audio, don't worry, but it's not going to really change anything, right? It's just terrible. My phone has better audio, my tablet has better audio, my laptop, my 2-in-1 Spectre has better audio. In fact, there's nothing I've reviewed with worse audio than the Surface Book 3. So, the full-size SD card slot, which is where I started when I picked this machine up to show you, I love that it's there. I mean, so many manufacturers have dumped it. But I'm not sure if Microsoft left it here because they are trying to cater to users like myself, because the lack of Thunderbolt 3 speaks otherwise, right? Or if it's just because this is, again, an effort to not have to redesign a single thing on this machine other than playing with the hinge itself, because that's where most of the change has happened. 2 USB 3 ports, great, Type A ports, and that's it. So, what does this machine have that's great other than a detachable display? Well, the cameras are best in class. The IR camera that just recognized me and, you know, utilized Windows Hello works perfectly. There's no bloatware on this machine. I already mentioned that it's competent when it comes to gaming, but it's not a gaming laptop. But at 4 pounds and change, this is heavy, a little unruly, and then while I'm okay with the size of the trackpad, I know many of you out there are going to wish that it was larger, like Apple obnoxious large, like that. I get it. So that's a criticism that I think is also within, you know, it's warranted. I'm not here to dismiss it because, quite frankly, they could have done it. But it again speaks to not wanting to, or apparently not wanting to invest a penny in making this machine more attractive. And I keep reiterating that because that's what the lack of Thunderbolt 3 speaks to. That's what the lack of, you know, creating a more competent display, a lack of any design language change. It all speaks to, we are going to milk this sucker until people just simply won't buy it anymore. So while improved webcams are great, improved release time on the hinge is great, and improved specs are all good things. This thing doesn't even come with a pen. You're going to spend another $100 to get the pen functionality. And remember, the beauty of taking this off isn't just, that's if it responds, see, sometimes it doesn't, isn't just how quickly you can remove it and walk around the house, because remember, battery life with this sucks. Another thing I cannot sugarcoat, and we're just about to the point where I'm going to talk about what I think Microsoft needs to do to change this. And I don't just mean redesign, I mean reimagine. It's time. You know, in 2015, this was amazing. In 2020, this is just the only product like it. And that's not a selling point anymore to me, as much as, again, I do love the Surface Book 3. Do not be fooled by me, you know, being real with all of you and telling you what you're looking at just isn't worth the money. I would not buy one of these in the 13-inch. I mean, the 13-inch $2,000 variant isn't bad because, you know, you are getting a dedicated GPU in a fairly small package. You're getting, again, Microsoft is a very good manufacturer. That doesn't mean they're free of defects, but they're a solid company, zero bloatware, very good support. And if you are near a physical store when there isn't a pandemic, that's a good thing too, because their support in the store is great as well. But, you know, why not look at a Razer Blade Stealth 13? You know, roughly the same price, actually a little bit less depending on which display you go with. And when it comes to this, you know, this really is the calling card. I mean, you can flip it around, obviously, and dock it the other way, but the truth of the matter is you've got a boatload of 2-in-1s on the market that really have been reimagined, that have been redesigned, that have been improved in every single possible way, that in fact share, if not outperform, the majority of the components inside this machine, and they're less expensive. Now, I'm not going to say that those other manufacturers have as good build quality, have as good support, and they certainly aren't going to give you a clean install of Windows. They're going to give you bloatware out the ass. But what's your time worth? I mean, if you're spending $1,000 more to have this concept, you gotta love the concept. And there's nothing wrong with that. By the way, you know, having more money than what you know what to do with is a good problem to have in life, right? And that's what I think of when I look at this Surface Book 3. It's one of those, I've got more money than what I know what to do with problems. And that's not a problem at the end of the day, if that's your life. But if you're a student, if you're someone who's going into debt to buy one of these, please rethink your decision. Because also, by furthering the sales on this, you're validating Microsoft's bullshit. And I don't like it when Apple users do that. You know, Apple users think that I'm critical of everything they do because it's Apple. No, I'm critical because the more you give money to any company for a product that isn't worth that amount, you put all of us in the shithole. I mean, that's just the way business works, and the market trends and things follow suit. So when Apple users are more than happy to shell out premium top dollar flagship money for 2-year-old, 3-year-old specs, they don't help the market. And I know that's not how they think of it, and most consumers don't think of it that way. That's because, you know, I've been in the stock market since the late 90s, and I do think of it that way. I do think of not just what's put on the table for me to review, but what it means to the future for all of us as consumers. And so the more that we give, we being any consumer out there, Microsoft money for something like this, I feel like we're going to continue to be disappointed. And it's a horrible conclusion to come to on a product that I once enjoyed so much. But now I get to what should be reimagined, okay? And hopefully you're staying with me. I think that at this point, we can't just have a battery and a GPU inside the keyboard. Those days have to end. If I was in the lab with Microsoft, and Microsoft, if you're listening, if you've actually made it 19 minutes into the video, cheers to you, give us a much beefier processor in this part of this machine. Put a 6-core, at least a 6-core processor in here. I shouldn't be able to point to a Lenovo C940 with a 9th gen processor that can take a crap on this, but I have one right here, and I'm going to bring that out eventually. So put that more powerful, true desktop replacement CPU as well as GPU inside the base. I don't care if you make it a little bit thicker. It's not thin to begin with. Let's face the facts. It's not light at 4¼ pounds. And that's not including the giant power brick, okay? Do that. Throw your new Qualcomm SQ1 co-partnered processor inside the tablet portion. Do you already know where I'm going? Put a bigger battery inside the tablet portion. Now, it's up to you with your new partnership with Google, with the Duo, to make this dual boot. If you want to do that, do it. But when I hit this button, give me a tablet that actually can get at least 6 to 8 hours of battery life. Give me a tablet. It doesn't have to have the Intel processor in it, because what I'm seeing here was something that is still the same concept from Gen 1 that in 2020 is stale. So it's not about the design, it's about what the machine is capable of. If this could detach and give me an Android or even a Windows 10 tablet on ARM with real battery life and a hinge so that I'm not just picking up a dud for the sake of, well, I can detach it, I can put it on a stand. That's not good enough anymore. That was cool when you first came out with it. And these speakers, as I mentioned, these tiny little things, they're crap. Put some speakers in the base. Make the machine thicker. If you're going to charge this sort of price, I understand that the concept, the original R&D was a fortune. You're past that hump. You've been past that hump, Microsoft. It's time to give us something new. So while a lot of reviewers out there and consumers, like the ones watching this now, are saying, why didn't they just give us a new design? I don't want just a new design. I don't want something that just looks different. I want something that functions. And by function, it's time to put a real processor, now that you have 15-inch beastie heavy things like this. You had it last gen. Put a real CPU in here. Put a real GPU in here. You easily could have put a 2080 in here, okay? It didn't have to be a 1660. And if I sound like I'm getting more animated, it's because it's the truth. At $2,800, this makes Apple look like they're for, you know, the people who are on a budget. Because this, you know, this is aimed at competing with the MacBook Pro, but even on paper, it doesn't. Granted, I'm not comparing operating systems. You couldn't get me to touch Apple with a 10-foot pole, but anyone who knows anything about hardware, and yes, Apple's leaving Intel, I wish them all the best. By the way, that's going to make them more money, for those of you that think that the processors will be better. And I'm not saying Intel's on the top of their game. They're slowly eroding. Another story for another time. Just make this a tablet that detaches now. It's time. Give us a kickstand. You already have the patent on the Surface Pro line. You've had it for years. It will not make this much thicker. Give us an OLED. If it's dual boot, great. If you want to keep cramming, you know, Windows and the future of Windows on ARM down our throats, I'll accept that as well. And then when it docks, it becomes the monster machine, okay? And it has Thunderbolt 3, okay? I would love it if you'd leave the full-size SD card slot. The hinge, I'm not critical of this. The people who are like, oh, it looks like something from the 80s, I don't give a crap. But it's time to make this tablet a real tablet that works. Because right now, what I'm left thinking is that how could I tell anyone out there that they shouldn't buy, for example, as I slide around the office, something like my daily driver that has an OLED that you can get for, you know, $1,500 or less, and will have all of the capability outside of the GPU, and then you could connect an eGPU because it does have Thunderbolt 3. Let's say they were willing to step up to a 15-inch. But again, I already mentioned the Razer Blade Stealth 13 is the best comparison at a $2,000 price point to the 13.5-inch model. Let's take a look at another option, the C940 from Lenovo. Yes, it doesn't have the 1660 Ti with Max-Q. It doesn't have as high a res display, but you can go 4K if you choose to. This model, which is a review unit, is 1080p. Has much better audio, has just as good build quality overall, in my opinion, has Thunderbolt 3. I mean, it doesn't have the battery life. It doesn't. It does not have the battery life, but that's because it doesn't have two batteries. And it doesn't have a detachable display, but it does have 2-in-1 capability, a built-in pen, and a more powerful CPU, nearly the same competence on the GPU side, and you're talking about $1,600. Okay, $1,600. So I could keep going with different machines to compare this to. Another one I would bring into frame is a simple tablet, because, Tab S6, best tablet ever made, at least in the Android world. Thin, light, completely competent and capable. DeX, it turns into a desktop experience. Of course, has pen input, comes with the pen. Geez Louise, bring the pen back. I mean, the price of this machine is ridiculous to not include a pen. And I get it that, someone said, hey, we can start charging for the pen because not everybody wants it. We don't have to give away stuff because we're established. I get that completely, but it's time for a change. It's time. There are just too many competing products that can perform as well, if not better. And yes, they don't have the trick of the button. But again, if all that does is give me a tablet that I have really, I love this, by the way. I love that I got a 15-inch Windows tablet like this, but it can't work independently, really. A lot of people will make the argument, yes, you can use it. Yeah, how long is the battery going to last? What are you going to actually do with it? The Iris Plus graphics on here are fine, so you can still game with it, but why would you do that? So you could stick it on a stand? Isn't this stand the real stand for it? I'm sorry, but I'm lost on the mission. I feel like when this was designed, it was innovative, it was cutting edge. And now, as it's grown up and matured, all it has become is a money tree. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at a certain point, it's time to build, it's time to plant a new seed. Plant that seed, man. Put that new seed in the ground. Give us something new. Like I said, if you make this dual boot, and for everyone who's going to say, well, Ed, you're saying put a Qualcomm chip in there, put some ARM silicone in there, and that's going to make the price more expensive. Right now, this machine is already carrying a premium of over $1,000. Easily over anything with comparable specs, of course, that doesn't have a screen that pops off. That's a lot of room. And if you don't think Microsoft can stick a Qualcomm chip in there and still make plenty of money, you don't know anything about component costs. So, again, if they were to put a chip in here and give us the ability to go into tablet mode, I don't think anybody's going to cry. I don't. Mobile processors, the SQ1 being Microsoft's biggest bragging right, prove that you can do plenty on ARM, even inside of Windows, right? So even if they don't go dual boot, there's just no excuse anymore. And they can make the battery larger. There's so much that can be done. And if that only comes in terms of weight, of adding, another quarter of a pound, you're already carrying around a misfit here, an unruly misfit. I even have trouble picking it up. It has no numerical pad. Why does such a big machine have no numpad? I will never know. I just don't get it. Why does such a big machine not have better speakers? By the way, oh yeah, the speaker test. I did it in my update, but really anyone who's coming here for the full review knows that I'm not going to just throw up benchmark numbers for you. Because at the end of the day, what does that mean to you? Yeah, it's better than last gen. The benchmark shows that. It better be. It's got new gen hardware. But I would never, ever recommend this to someone who cares, at the end of the day, about performance, because that's not what this machine is built for. It's a jack of all trades, but unfortunately it's a master of none. And when Microsoft first launched this product, I really thought it could be both. I thought it was just a matter of time before we got there. Now, oh man, it's disappointing. And it took a long time. I grappled with this. I waited for more firmware updates. Because by the way, battery management on this, it's not good. It took a lot of updates for things to change. For example, I would plug this in, leave it charging overnight, come back, try to detach the tablet, and it would say the tablet battery had no charge. Tablet battery be at 1%. And don't ask me about this. You're not supposed to have to hold this down. So, all of these little things, Microsoft, you've had enough time. It shouldn't just be that it's 10 times faster now on the release. It is noticeably faster. But come on, if Microsoft can't get battery management on dual batteries properly, then who the hell is going to? I mean, Samsung's doing it now. They've been doing it in phones. You know, it's becoming more common. Let's get it right, you know? Let's just get it right. And so at the end of the day, battery life is good, build quality solid, but there's just a laundry list of shit it cannot do. But yet you've spent enough that you could have bought 2 machines that are as competent as it. Really, I'm not kidding. At that price. I mean, at least the way I shop. Maybe not walking into Worst Buy, but you see what I'm saying. So, I mean, I'm at a loss. I've always loved the Surface Book, and Microsoft has slowly not made me hate it, but I'm starting to resent what it stands for. I mean, to think that you can spend almost $4 grand on one of these on the business side with a Quadro and still get media, you know, still have a Core i7 1065 G7 in there. Holy shit. Holy shit. I mean, again, that is a processor you can find in budget laptops. And I don't want to hear the excuse that this is how they keep it thin and light. Is it also how you keep the speakers sounding like shit? I mean, look, I'm being critical because Microsoft to me is the standard bearer. They are the benchmark. They can change the game in the same way Apple can change the game. Microsoft didn't used to be able to do that, but they've been able for years. And now they're sitting on their hands like cowards. I mean, this is a machine that has so much potential that would easily be my first choice every single time. But I've already mentioned what they've got to do. I didn't give them this sort of shit for 2nd gen, but in the 3rd generation, I'm, again, not going to be like everyone else out there and just say, the design is long in the tooth. It doesn't say 2020 when I look at it. This thing needs to be rethought, reimagined. Go ask Disney's Imagineers, okay? They've been shut down long enough. I know they're reopening. Holy shit, scary. But it's time to reimagine it. And I've given my own input. You know, put at least a 6-core processor inside of this, and then give us something really light and battery efficient in the tablet part. You can do it, Microsoft. You can do it. I believe in you. And you can give us a better GPU and still make money. You can. You absolutely, like, why a 2060 couldn't have been in here? It could have. If you got to make it a little thicker, I understand that this thing is really quiet. But once you put it under load, guess what? It's not quiet. I mean, this makes all the noise. This gets rid of all of the heat dissipation. But it's not quiet anymore. The point is, at a certain point, even Apple understands this. The money they sunk into R&D, they've made the money. It's time to walk away. It's time to come out with something new. And again, I don't want what Apple does where it's just a redesign. I want it to be reimagined. So it's time to make OLEDs a standard. And for those of you that want me to say OLED, you know, just, I could say something really not nice. But I'm not going to bother. It's time to give us the next gen display tech. Okay? I can't just keep looking to phone manufacturers. LG and Samsung can't be the only companies that have a brain on this. Microsoft, you do too. Stop pinching pennies on this IPS panel. I know it's a bigger pain in the ass because it's a 3:2 aspect ratio. It's a custom order. But with the volume you do and with the money you have, I mean, I'm a shareholder. Get on it. Come on. Do it. And in addition to that, besides, you know, making this an OLED, like I said, give us a kickstand. And for every person that says you can buy a case, why the hell would I want to buy a case? I'm talking about, I'm in my house, I want to pop this off and use it in bed, and I don't want to bring this piece of crap with it because I don't need the GPU when I'm in bed, okay? I don't need the GPU if I'm at the dining nook. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not... Give it a kickstand. I shouldn't have to use a tablet stand. You have the IP. You have the patent on that hinge. That hinge is the best in the business. Stick it on this. Look at how crappy Samsung tries to imitate it with the case for the Tab S6, and it instead nearly destroys the Tab S6. So there's so much potential. And at the end of the day, for $2,800, the flashiest feature this really has is 32 gigs of RAM. And did I mention the 0.5 terabyte NVMe? What year is it? What year is it? My 2 terabyte NVMe inside of my HP Spectre X360 13T, I mean, that's a $2,000 laptop. You can buy it for less on any given day. With an OLED, with the same processor. Yeah, only 16 gigs of RAM, granted. Not much room for upgradability. This has none, by the way. I didn't mention that. This is a one-and-done machine. You get what you pay for, and you live with it until you throw it out. And by throw it out, I don't mean put it in the garbage. Recycle it, sell it, give it to a family member. You know what I mean. So, final thoughts. This machine can do a lot of things, but it should be like $1,000 less. I mean, to me, you don't need the 32 gigs of RAM. It's kind of like when I reviewed the Samsung Chromebook recently. People got angry that I said, you don't need a Ferrari that you can't take out on, the Autobahn. You just don't need it. I didn't say that verbatim, but that was the point. It's like the machine has so much potential in design and overall capability, but yet the limitations of the operating system kind of make it a head scratch. Well, same here. I don't get why there are 32 gigs of RAM in here. I don't understand it. And trust me, I like that there are 32 gigs of RAM, but paired with that processor, I don't get it. It's not a bad pairing, don't get me wrong, but we should have a more powerful CPU. Or Microsoft, make this the Surface Book Lite and create a new Surface Book line that's the real deal, that carries the same pricing, but gives components that reflect it. I mean, again, even Apple does a better job at this. And I can't believe I'm saying it, but it's true. Microsoft has gotten bloated enough that Apple is less expensive. I mean, other than the monitor and the stand, and yeah, you know where I'm going. But you know what I mean, MacBook Pro. And that's what this gets compared to, and it shouldn't, because the MacBook Pro doesn't even have a touch screen, let alone a screen that comes off. So either junk this at this point is kind of what I'm getting at, or as I've been saying over and over again, reimagine it. Oh, and by the way, for the people that want the speaker test, I mean, it's just so bad, so bad. Here, I'm going to go to everyone's favorite news site. Oh man, I tried to stay away from it through the whole video, but if you made it this long, God bless you. And if you don't believe in God, then just, I wish you the best in general, because you don't need to. Actually, I'm not going to play anything from this. Let's go to YouTube. I'll go to my channel, all right? We'll do that. And, the keyboard, I could have spoken about it, but I don't even know why I would. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the same keyboard since the first gen. There's nothing new. Oh, and look at this. Ironic and yet not at the same time. Volume all the way up.
And today I wanted to share an update on my experience with the Lenovo
Max volume.
940. This is the 15-inch model in iron gray, and I'll remind everyone that even though this looks nearly identical to its smaller 14-inch sibling that I reviewed at the end of 2019, its internals make this a remarkably different machine. This is a much more powerful device. In fact, it's aimed squarely at being a desktop replacement. So we've got a 15.6-inch full HD touchscreen. You can go with the UHD option, but expect battery life to drop.
And maybe this is really where I should have started, okay? Because I would recommend to every single one of you out there, buy the C940 instead. Yes, the screen can't be detached. Yes, you're not getting a 32, actually you might be able to get a 32 gig configuration now on their website, but you're getting a better processor. You're getting almost the same performance with the GPU, a little bit less, but everything else is literally better. You're saving yourself a fortune of money. Yeah, the webcams aren't as good. It doesn't have Windows Hello. I do love Windows Hello, but not enough to sell my soul. It's just that simple. No fingerprint scanner here, by the way. I didn't mention that, but you don't need it. I just don't have a selling point for this. And when I say selling point, I'm not a salesman. A lot of people on here might think so. Never taken a dollar, never planned to from anyone. I get a lot of units for review. Some I buy on my own because I don't have relationships with certain vendors. That's just the way it goes, right? But I think the Surface Book is the best concept on the market. It unfortunately now lives in a world where it's the worst executed. That's really the best way I can sum it up. There are just so many options that are better for less money that I don't even know how you could consider this thing. So, at the end of the day, do I think you're a fool if you buy this? No, you're not a fool. Especially if you've watched this video, because then you understand what you're getting yourself into. You know that you're buying it because it's cool, and that's it. And that's really subjective, because I don't even think it's cool anymore, because it just, as you may have noticed, it rubs me, wait, let's do this. It rubs me the wrong way. And that's because for the Surface Book 3 to have so much potential and fall so flat, Microsoft has the budget to blow us away, not to ask us to, take one for the team. And that's what I feel the Surface Book line has become. Again, the 13.5-inch less so, because it's more comparable to other things, but that's about it. And
someone's at front door.
That's how you know it's time for me to end my video. At any rate, I hope you all enjoyed it. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them at that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Stay safe. Later.